Myra and John, it's a pleasure to have you on the podcast today and to hear more about your personal histories and also the work that you're doing in the Borderplex.
Thank you for the invitation, and it's an honor to share this platform with you, John.
Well, likewise, Maida, what a pleasure it is to be on this podcast, and I think the world of Maida and what she does at the Hunt Institute. So thank you for inviting us to be on. We appreciate
Fantastic. We want to learn more about the Paso del Norte region, given that immigration, the border is in the news, especially in this election season. I think the more that people in certainly the United States can understand about this area, the better. So Myra, tell us just a little bit about your personal background.
Sure thing. I'm the executive director of the Hunt Institute for Global Competitiveness here at the University of Texas El Paso. I have always lived most of my life in a cross-border setting, in particular in Texas and in Mexico. I've lived in Monterey, Laredo, Texas, McAllen, Texas, and I've been living here for 10 years here in El Paso. I'm an economist. I have a master's degree in economics from New York University, and I'm currently pursuing my PhD in data science from UTEP. I worked for 10 years at the Central Bank of Mexico, and for some other years at Morgan Stanley Capital Investment. And that's how I was interested in understanding more about the U.S.-Mexico border interconnectedness.
And your background in economics and finance and the fact that you're a lifelong learner and still pursuing degrees is amazing, but I think hugely important to the discussion we're going to have about the economic relationship between our two countries, which is really what you're all about, John. Tell us a little bit more about your personal background.
Well, I was born and raised in Las Cruces, a multi-generational family of people that settled this area a long time ago. On my father's side, my family was one of the founders of Mesilla, a little town outside of Las Cruces. So love this region. My heart has always been here. Shortly after high school, I went to college in Washington, D.C. at Georgetown University School of Foreign Service. I graduated from there. I was working on Capitol Hill at the time for my congressman on the House Appropriations Committee staff, and went to law school at night at Georgetown. So I'm a lawyer by training. I have been involved in policy and government affairs virtually my whole life. Was most recently, before this job, the cabinet secretary for economic development in New Mexico. And it was an honor to do that, honor to be in public service. And so this job was a natural transition for me, being the CEO and president of the Borderplex Alliance, based here in El Paso.
Tell us more about the Borderplex Alliance and what it does.
The Borderplex Alliance is a very unique organization in that we, to my knowledge, are the only privately funded economic development and policy advocacy group that represents 3 states, 2 countries. We define the Borderplex region and the region that our organization represents is Ciudad Juarez, El Paso County, and then, of course, my home county of Doña Ana in New Mexico. We're involved in industrial recruitment, policy advocacy. Maida is a great ally of ours, and we work together to promote our region. And she does a great job providing us with data and research that help us make our case why companies should locate here.
Sounds like she's going to be even more expert in data science shortly. So Myra, tell us a bit more about the Hunt Institute, which is located at UTEP, I believe.
Sure thing. The Hunt Institute was created 10 years ago, and it was the result of an altruistic donation by the Hunt Family Foundation, who donated $5 million to the University of Texas El Paso. The mission of the Institute is to foster the socioeconomic well-being of the Paso del Norte region and beyond. We have several platforms to do so. And when I refer to the Paso del Norte region, it's the exact regions that John was mentioning about.
And I have a map of the Paso del Norte region right in front of me. The intersection of the 2 countries, 3 states, the multiple cities. It's an immensely complex area. You mentioned it at the Hunt Institute, I think, saying it offers the most efficient overland trade route between the Pacific and Atlantic coasts, from Los Angeles to Houston, from New Orleans to Jacksonville. Myra, tell me why you think this intersection of these political entities, its geography, and all the potential of this area is so important.
Sure thing. We are at the crossroads of three states and two nations. We have nearby, we are connected to I-10, which connects the Atlantic to the Pacific Ocean. We are also connected with I-25 that connects North America. And we have railroads that go through this particular location. So we are also investigating more about supply chains, and El Paso ranks second in terms of trade along the U.S.-Mexico border. So it is the most efficient trade route for North America.
And obviously for the 10 Across project, which is strung together because of the I-10 going east and west, we're really interested in what happens as you pass through this region. John, as you see it, and you're trying to generate economic development and making a lot of connections in this process, tell us how you see the assets of this region as well.
We have a tremendous number of assets. As Maida referred to, our geographic location is spectacular. We are in the middle of the USMCA countries, Canada, Mexico, the US, north and south, and east and west, from the ports of Long Beach and LA to the port of Houston. We, as Maida said, have enormous transportation assets here. But the thing that really strengthens our ability to recruit and retain companies here is our workforce. We have one of the youngest workforces of any major metropolitan area in North America. And the thing that is very, very interesting about our region is, despite the political jurisdictions, the three of them, we are in fact a region of 2.7 million individuals that are living in one metropolitan area. If we were to take, it's a seamless community really that we have. And if you were to take those 2.7 million people, put it somewhere in the middle of the United States, all of a sudden we would be a top 20 metropolitan area in terms of population. So we have an abundant supply of workers, young workers, trained workers, and we're very, very proud of that. And we, of course, also have a compelling business case to make when it comes to low taxes, low cost of living, and the other things that businesses are always looking for.
And you mentioned the USMCA, which is the US-Mexico-Canada agreement. So obviously, like NAFTA before it, it's an effort to try to synthesize these assets in the three major countries in this case. Tell us about that agreement, what it means, and also I think it's up for a renewal of sorts in 2026, the importance of that, and do you have any trepidation about the renewal of that agreement? So let's talk about first what it is and then what it might have to go through to be reestablished.
Well, the USMCA was, and I don't think I'm overstating this, was a tremendous achievement for the three countries. It is a model trade agreement that modernized and updated NAFTA, the North American Free Trade Agreement. But the USMCA, TEMEC, as it's known in Mexico, has really been a game changer for our region, for the economies of the three countries. It has provided jobs, hope, and opportunity, has helped a burgeoning middle class in Mexico. So the USMCA has been, and I hope will continue to be, a tremendous guiding force for the economies of all three countries. We're all doing well, comparatively speaking. And we have to understand that the roots of the USMCA is founded upon the notion that North America has to come together to compete with other regions of the world. And with the post-pandemic world and some of the geopolitical tensions, the USMCA is absolutely more compelling than ever. So we need to make sure that the USMCA continues in effect. We can improve it, of course, but you're absolutely right. In 2026, there will be a 6-year review of the USMCA, and I'm hopeful that it won't be tarnished in any way, shape, or form. There are advocates of free and fair trade, and of course, there are enemies of free and fair trade. Right. And I certainly hope that this 6-year review will provide us an opportunity to improve upon the agreement and certainly not use it as a vehicle to destroy or tear it apart in any way, shape, or form. One last thing I will say about this is that there are people who, in my concern about this, and I've been very public about this, is that Mexico is an economic and strategic ally of the United States. And I think that there are people in Washington who think otherwise. And for that reason, there are many who are skeptical of the USMCA. And what I can tell you, and I tell those people, is that there is no zero-sum game when it comes to free and fair trade. A job created in Mexico should be a job created in the United States and in Canada potentially.
Right.
And so, the thing that people have to realize is that this agreement has provided for millions of jobs for Americans, as well as Canadians and Mexicans. So we need to continue to make sure it's protected and make sure it continues to thrive.
So I really want to dive deep on the point that you're making. The perception of Mexico and our relationship with that country, the border, immigration, I think is being inaccurately portrayed in many dimensions. But there is no doubt that trade is increasing with Mexico, imports to this country, and lessening with China, which, as I think in literature from both your organizations, you're suggesting the time is now. I literally have that underlined here from one of your brochures, to seize the opportunity that is represented by this region, with more manufacturing coming to Mexico and being in a relationship with the U.S. It does seem the global circumstance is now being manifested in this region. So Myra, how do you think about that, both in economic but also in socioeconomic terms?
I also want to add more economic indicators for El Paso before providing context for the USMCA. El Paso County has the largest GDP along the Texas southern border counties. It also has the largest population, as John was mentioning.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was saying before, it ranks second in terms of trade. It ranks second in terms of overall trade, but it ranks first in terms of healthcare industry trade. It ranks, Santa Teresa, Port of Entry, ranks first, for example, in terms of cattle trade. So the supply chains that have already been built over the years are transformative for the economy of the U.S. and Mexico. As a matter of fact, spending by Mexican nationals here in El Paso along the Texas Mexico border is second, just behind Hidalgo County. So El Paso is a very important geographic location for the U.S.-Mexico border relationship. Now, as I always say, what goes through the border doesn't stay here in the border, right? There is a benefit of this trade. We recently worked on a grant for the Department of Homeland Security, and we found that a 10-minute reduction in border wait times, meaning more efficient that more efficient trade facilitation, impacts the overall trade. So a 10-minute reduction in border wait times would increase by $26 million commercial trade on a monthly basis, or $312 million on an annual basis.
Mm-hmm.
That has an impact not only with respect to the border communities, but also with respect to the overall benefits that we as final consumers get. Mm-hmm. Most of these products that we found are intermediate products, so that the last stage of getting the final product is here in the United States. And also the prices that we get based on this trade are lowered, given this trade. So USMCA has facilitated a consumption and lower prices for our final products.
Mm-hmm. And when you're talking about wait times and the benefits of reducing them, I read some of these numbers. They're rather astounding. I think what people forget is that people are passing, trucks are passing, goods are passing across the border on an hourly basis between our two countries. And for many people, their livelihoods are about moving across the border every day. Myra, can you just talk about that, the porosity of the border in the best sense, not the porosity of the border as the way it might be portrayed politically, but the exchange that happens on a very normalized basis for people?
Sure thing. We live here on the border, and it is a unique ecosystem. We here on the border, we see these trucks going through our I-10. I'm here at UTEP. I have I-10 next to us, and we see all of these commercial trucks going through east, west, and north and south. So there are also binational companies with operations on both sides here in the U.S. and in Mexico as well. Bilingual. Most of the people here are bilingual, are bicultural as well. In order to operate in Mexico, you have to have not only knowledge in terms of operations, but also in terms of the culture and the language. So that's very peculiar here for our region.
Do you want to add anything to that, John? Just about that situation at the border?
Well, the Borderplex has become the fifth largest manufacturing hub in North America. And 8 short years ago, when I started this job, we were eighth, and our region continues to grow its manufacturing footprint. And we're very excited about the future. The next 12 to 18 months should be very good for us in terms of economic growth, especially in the manufacturing sector. Our organization is a leading indicator of what is going on in the world, I think, when it comes to trade and what is happening with this maybe overused word now, reshoring, nearshoring, ally shoring, whatever we call it. But it's a real phenomenon, and we're seeing it right now. Our organization is at record levels of vetted projects looking at our region. And what we're seeing is a trend, not only in terms of the manufacturing growth, but we're also seeing a trend of what we call mega projects, which are, for us, projects that are $500 million of CapEx, capital expenditures, and hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs. And we're competing very nicely for these projects. So we're excited about the future.
Maybe you should mention your 2025 Ascend plan. What's in that plan? It has many features, I think 30 plus. I don't expect you to run through that list, but I think it relates to what you're describing. Having observed what you see before you and the increase of activity there, things ascending, what else is in this plan people should know about?
Well, it was aptly named in 2020. So when we started the planning for 2025 and what we were hoping to accomplish, I have to tell you, we've been very, very pleasantly, not surprised, but we've been gratified by what we have accomplished as a region and our organization. But the plan has a heavy emphasis on workforce development, planning for infrastructure, and certainly addressing the workforce needs of our citizens and our companies. So it was very heavy on those. I'm happy to report that we've accomplished about 70% of the many goals and objectives that were in that report. We're in the final stages now of our 2030 plan. We will be naming it soon officially. So we've been very proud to work with our community leaders, MIDA included, to plot our course for the next 5 years. And it's a very, very exciting opportunity for us.
I want to talk about resources, and I'm going to get to energy and water in a minute, but workforce is a resource, a human resource, the human capital, the intellectual capital that goes into operating in a 21st century economy is profoundly important. Myra, I'm sure you talk about this all the time at UTEP. Yeah. Maybe you can describe what you're trying to do. And when John's talking about workforce, I want to make that mean more than just how people, I think, imagine workforce and Mexico and agriculture. It's got to be much more than that, certainly to serve these mega projects. Myra, why don't you start and we'll go back to John.
Yeah, and I'm going to transition the comment that John made with respect to workforce development. Well, here, UTEP is the only R1 university along the southern border counties. That's very important. And it's only one of the 19 Hispanic serving institutions with the R1 status.
For our audience, explain R1. Has to do with research.
R1 means that there is an impressive amount of research expenditures, more than $100 million on an annual basis, and UTEP is proud to be one of those. So that's one. And with respect to energy, to the question that you were asking, El Paso is home to significant pipelines that connect Mexico and the United States. One with respect to natural gas and another one with respect to refined oil. We are the proximity that we have to the Permian Basin allows us to export refined oil. We are also home for one of the only refined oil refineries we have along the southern border counties in Texas.
Mm-hmm. So let's talk about that, as some of our audience might want to hear. So we're talking about fossil fuels, and yes, the Permian Basin is adjacent, hugely important. And rightly or wrongly, we're not going to relieve ourselves completely of fossil fuels immediately. That isn't possible, but there is an energy transition in our future. We see it happening. So talk about energy as it's currently organized and the importance of that to the region, but also your participation as you see it in things like wind, solar, and other things that'll probably be critical to the future of this region as well. Talk about those two things.
Sure thing. And I know that we are called the Sun City for a reason, right?
Mm-hmm.
We have more. John, correct me if I'm wrong, but it's 360 days of sunny days.
I thought it was
here.
365. It's always
There you go. There you go.
Exactly. And I know that El Paso Electric is conducting major investments with respect to solar energy here. So solar energy is as a sun city, the capability that we have to absorb solar energy is huge. So yes, that's also very important.
Any thoughts about energy, John, as you see it supporting this increased manufacturing and the draw on our electric systems?
We're very blessed here to have El Paso Electric in our community. They are a reliable partner for providing energy. So I want to give a shout out to them. We're not part of ERCOT here.
Right. I was about to say, you're uniquely positioned within Texas because you're
That's
not
right.
part of that system that seems to have some challenges.
And we do tout that when we do have site visits from companies looking to expand.
I'll bet you do.
So it's reliable, it's affordable. And as Maida mentioned, El Paso Electric is investing a sizable amount of money into the renewables, and especially in solar. They just opened a major solar farm just north of El Paso in a community called Chaparral in New Mexico. Mm-hmm. And companies, it's interesting, companies are now asking the question about what sort of energy source do you have? It's not just do you have affordable and reliable energy, but what's the source? Is it carbon neutral? Is it carbon free? And El Paso Electric checks all those boxes, which is very, very nice. And I will say this as well, that the thing we're seeing and the transition we're seeing is companies, especially again in manufacturing, that are looking to produce batteries, all sorts of components that go into everything from these windmills to solar panels. And there's a definite transition in the manufacturing environment that we're seeing. Many of the projects that we've located recently and many of the projects that we are seeing that we're trying to get here are indeed rooted in that renewable energy sector.
Mm-hmm. That is the same trend, and we have another podcast about this very topic here in the Phoenix region, where companies are asking critical questions, as you point out, not just the availability of power, but what kind of power, how's it's generated. And I'm sure that, Myra, you have many students at UTEP who are interested in these kind of topics, and it also relates to water. In our case, maybe yours as well. Tell me about the reliability of water, where it's coming from, and how you're planning for the future. So since our two countries, and we have a whole podcast as part of the series on border water issues, tell us about how you address water challenges. Maybe, Amira, we'll start with you and again, go back to John.
Sure thing. I know that El Paso Water Utilities is making also significant investments with respect to how companies get their water. So I know that that's a significant asset for many companies, but I think that the work that they are doing is being great here in the region.
Mm-hmm. I agree. El Paso Water has been very forward-thinking in providing not only affordable water resources, but plentiful water resources. We're extremely, extremely blessed, even though we live in a desert, that we have plentiful and abundant water resources. El Paso Water has the largest inland desalination plant in the world. Mm-hmm. They have been very forward-thinking in making sure that the water rights are plentiful. I know that many of our sister cities in the Southwest are not as lucky and you're probably aware of the challenges that Arizona has.
Yep.
Fortunately, we do not have those issues. Of course, nothing's ever perfect, but we do have a 50-year supply of water based on projected growth, and both industrial and residential. So we have none of the problems that many other communities have for a variety of reasons. But again, a shout out to our water company here, El Paso Water. They do an amazing job with the resources that they've planned for and have.
That said, and I'm with you, and I want to hear, maybe tell us one more thing before I ask my next question. To have a desal plant, which everybody assumes would be located on the ocean, right? We're desalinating water and bringing it inland. Tell us about an inland desal plant.
We have an interesting geological phenomenon, an asset called the Tularosa Basin, which is, to my knowledge, one of the largest aquifers in North America. I have been told that, and that's the good news. The bad news is it's brackish. It's high salinity content, and so it's not potable. But with this desalination plant, we're able to provide water to a whole lot of residences and businesses. There are plans to expand it at some point, but if we can get to the point, and by the way, we've had Israeli companies come in and help us with their technology. They're leaders on this as well. And so we've been in touch with Israeli officials on how we can efficiently implement the newest and latest technology for desalination. And that also is something that, as we look at the future growth of our region, that I'm sure will rely on more and more.
It's interesting how water is exemplary of so many things, the use of technology, the forward planning that's required in any part of the country. But in our particular case, as we're discussing it today in the Paso del Norte region, two countries are sharing a border that happens to be defined by a river. And there have been some discussions, maybe not just in your area, but back and forth with Mexico, with the US, Texas, and others. There is an exchange required of water back and forth. How do you see water as advancing the relationship between the two countries? The same way manufacturing is a key point of intersection. You see water as being a way that we can work together more effectively in the future. Myra, does that resonate with you?
Yeah, and I'm going to add that it's not only water, but also electricity. I
There you go.
remember, and there are many other assets that we need to work not only at the border communities, but also along at the binational level. I remember there was an emergency. Maybe it was back in 2015. I can't recall, where Comisión Federal de Electricidad, that's the electricity utility in Ciudad Juarez, was in an urgent need of electricity, and our community helped them. So the water, electricity, oil are key assets for infrastructure. And again, I want to highlight again that it's not only the infrastructure. When we talk about border communities, we always, or most of us, refer to the border infrastructure at the ports of entry. I want to mention that it's important to think about the infrastructure also at these border communities, right? And how the exchange of commodities that go through these border communities is key for our economic development.
So I want to close this conversation out with something you were just tackling, Myra, which was how El Paso supported Ciudad Juarez when power was needed, which raises the larger question, what does that mean to be binational? And how can we use that word in the most effective way to understand, as both of you have articulated already today, this is really one community. It has some artificial boundaries that run through it, and I understand they're hugely important. But nevertheless, if you look at the region, at the end of the day, it's a community. How do you think about the term binational, and how can we enhance that term to be helping to advance relationship between our two countries, advance economic development, and other things like that? John, maybe I'll start with you.
It's a beautiful, beautiful culture that we have here, and being binational means that we're connected. And our region is, in fact, a model for how you conduct binational relations. We've grown our economies together. We have a shared history, a shared culture. And I can remember, and I state this with great pride, I can remember growing up in Las Cruces where the unemployment rate was in the El Paso side in the low single digits. I remember the unemployment rate in Ciudad Juarez, because I remember doing a research paper at Georgetown for this, was in the low 20 percentile, something like 20% unemployment rate in Juarez. Today, we move forward, and our unemployment rate in the El Paso side now mirrors the national average. And the unemployment rate in Ciudad Juarez, according to government statistics, is well below 3%. Burgeoning middle class in Ciudad Juarez. We have grown together. And so being binational means that we are in this together. We are linked very directly with our past, but more importantly, we understand, and that's part of the beauty of the founders of our organization, is that we know that we will be linked in the future. And the question is, how do we go about providing for a brighter future? And when we plan, we don't do it in a vacuum. We always reach out to our Mexican counterparts and always get their input on how we should be growing our region, our economy, and our culture together. And if you haven't visited here, it's hard to explain. But if you land here and visit here, first-time visitors are astounded about our beauty, our culture, our vibrancy, our cuisine, and most importantly, the beautiful people that we have here. That's what it means to be binational.
I have enjoyed much of what you just described. And while it sounds fantastic, and it is, if you had a wish list of things you'd like to see improved, could be around technology, could be around warehousing, transportation, electrification. If you had a short list, maybe 2 or 3 items that you would like to see that would advance what you were just describing a little bit, what would be on that list for you, John?
It's really nothing inside our region. I continue to be frustrated by national news media, pop culture, other widely distributed forms of entertainment and news that portray the border, particularly our region, as a violent and dangerous frontier. El Paso is the second safest city in America of any city above 500,000. While there is violence here, we're not perfect. We are certainly working on a community level to make sure that we continue the safe streets that we have, especially here in the border. But it does affect us. It limits the optimization of job growth, because very often people will not come to our area because they think it's on the border. Oh my God, it's unsafe. That is a false narrative. And we try to do what we can do through platforms like yours and podcasts like yours to dispel those rumors and myths.
And we are more than happy to do that, because, again, I've been there and I've enjoyed El Paso and Ciudad Juarez, and it is a fantastic place in many respects. So, Myra, now you can add, if you like, of course, to the high quality of life that's there, but also this term binational and how we enhance that and what would help to do that.
Of course. I like to have a new term here, which is bi-operational. I think John knows that there are companies here and there that we have distinct laws. They have to learn how to navigate through those laws. In terms of the Hunt Institute, I'm going to give a very specific example. We have to manage and analyze databases from the US and Mexico and Canada, okay? Those databases are different, not only with respect of how each government collects data, but also in terms of how they analyze data. So it is up to us, when it comes to collaboration, to come up with a unique, different way of seeing these databases. So, for example, we have employment, and the way we came up with a new idea of how to analyze employment sectors is very unique. So when I say binational, it's bicultural. It's getting to know and navigate the different laws and also the different structures. So bi-operational. So it's unique. We have families here and there. We have students that live, for example, in Ciudad Juarez and cross the border on a daily basis. and they are here studying in the US and go back to Ciudad Juarez. We have already common roots. We have families that live here and there. So that's binational, bi-operational, if I may add the term here.
I think it's fantastic. And it explains why, if I understood you correctly at the very beginning of this discussion, you're advancing your own education in data science and other things like that, because it's not only what you observe. This is a very 10 across thesis. We like to talk about what people witness, their life experience, and compare that to the data that either confirms that what they're seeing is in fact the case, and here's the trend line. And what you're suggesting is being able to really use data effectively, especially when you have two countries trying to come to a common term, or cities kind of come to common terms. Data turns out to be hugely important, how you process it, look at it, analyze, and make decisions based on it. So I think that's a fantastic way to conclude this, and demonstration that you're continuing to move this discussion forward in a really quite specific way. That's wonderful. So John, Myra, it has been a pleasure to speak with you. And John, I think your point, if our podcast can alert people to the benefits of understanding this region, coming to this region, working in this region, whatever it might be, we're more than happy to do that. So thank you both for your time today.